One of our vital co-sponsors is the U.S. Census Bureau. And for many years now, we've been really pleased to have the sponsorship, in particular by the Southern California Regional District. And James T. Christie is the director of the Regional Bureau. And he has been a loyal attendee at this event. He tells me it's the one he looks forward to every year. I think he just says that to everybody. But he does show up every year, and he does sponsor every year, and he's got more of a role this year. I'd like to bring Jamie up to the podium, have him speak, because he is getting ready for the 2020 census, and they are doing big experiments here in LA County to see whether things will work in the U.S. as a whole. So Jamie, come on up here, and thank you so much for joining us once again and sharing your expertise.
Great. Thank you, Dal. Good morning, everybody. So welcome on an early Monday morning to the Discovery Science Center. Isn't this a cool venue and a cool facility? Thank you, SCAG, for making this an option for us to come here. I'd like to thank everybody for participating. As Dal said, I do say at the beginning of every speech I give, it's a great event for me to be at this year. That was a joke. I don't say that everywhere. I actually do love coming here, and it's not because of the presentations and everything. It's the conversations that I get, and I love to see how people use census data. I'm at the front end of all of our information. We're the place that gathers it and puts it together. It's always great to see all the interesting ways that data gets used, and sort of the way people use it to solve their own real kind of problems and analyze their own perspectives. So SCAG's been a terrific partner throughout the years. What you don't know about our partnership with SCAG is they're also invaluable in our plans to do the 2020 census. And we're already engaging with them in terms of how we're going to work at the local level on things like addresses and different things like that. So thanks everybody for being here. I want to walk through real quickly just kind of what we're doing in preparation for the 2020 census, because this will be the pattern and the plan that we will use to provide the next sort of rich data set when we start releasing this data in 2021. So before I talk about the census, I just want to kind of go through a perspective on why we do a census. Most of you know this, but we are a constitutionally mandated federal activity, and this is the language in the Constitution that sort of is our charter. We talk a lot about the data, we talk about its uses, we talk about definitions and things, but the fundamental reason we do a census is to apportion the U.S. House of Representatives. So let's look back real quickly at the 2010 census. There were three key phases that we did. Real important part about redistricting or apportionment isn't just knowing how many people there are, but it's knowing where they live. So we put forward a pretty phenomenal effort in terms of building a list of addresses in the last census. And then we delivered the census form to everybody in different ways. And then for those people that didn't return their census form, which I know none of you were in that category, we followed up and knocked on the doors for people that didn't respond and collected that information directly. This is the 2010 census form right here. How many of you remember getting this? How many of you remember filling it out? How many of you filled it out more than once? So this was delivered to everybody. We delivered it in English and Spanish. We used different strategies to get this to the doors. Most people got this in the mail. Some people got it hand-delivered. A few actually got it through some other mechanisms. But the vast majority of the American public received this census form in the mail. It was a paper census. You filled it out and sent it back to us. Then we mounted this massive effort to contact people who didn't return that census form to us. We went to 50 million addresses, actually 48 million. We found that of those 48 million addresses that we went to, 14 million of them were vacant. There was nobody there. And you think about the timing of this, it was an interesting time. We were out on the streets in 2010, and those of you familiar with housing, remember that that was kind of a crazy time for housing. There was a lot of foreclosures and different activities then. So we encountered that as we went out and did our work. We hired over 500,000 census takers across the nation to do this activity. And we spent a lot of zeros. almost as much as SCAG's annual budget is what we've done. This was all done via paper. Our census takers were equipped with a pile of questionnaires, a box of pencils, and a few erasers, and we sent them out to the streets, and they actually knocked on the doors and collected this data via paper. We were successful. We delivered the population count on time and to the president like we were supposed to do. We did the apportionment. No surprise here. The change in the country's political representation migrated south and west. Everybody expected that. So we did everything. Then we actually looked at in terms of what kind of a census we had. This chart is a little difficult to read, but everything close to sort of that horizontal bar, the zero line, is good. This is just a measure of how many people we double counted or missed altogether. And a positive line on this one, a bar at the top, means that we had a large undercount. So high means bad, low means bad. Getting right on the middle is good. And you can see that as we've progressed through the decades, the 2010 census, we felt that we actually overcounted the population by 1/100%. And I won't get into how we measure that, but it was the best census we've ever done. We were phenomenally impressed with the results. But we had a problem, and this is the problem. This is what it costs to take the census, and this is in inflation-adjusted dollars. You can see the cost per housing unit from 1970 has gone up significantly into the 2010 census. So we like this chart. I don't know if we like that chart a lot. We don't like this chart very much. Congress really doesn't like this chart, and the chart that we're projecting for the 2020 census, sort of an exponential rise in cost. So we know we have to do something to save money. So we focused on 4 areas of innovation, primarily driven to balance the cost issue without compromising the quality. And that was, when we built our address list, we want to do a better job of building the address list. We want to provide the public with better response options. And there's ways to use existing information and improve our field activities to save money as well. So when I say better address validation, what do I mean? How many of you just drove here of your own mind? How many figured out how to get here? Or how many of you used some technology to get here? Yeah, most of us punched it into our GPS, and there's somewhere in somebody's data bank out there is a whole list of addresses. Why do we at the Census Bureau have to go reinvent everything? So what we're doing is we're making better use of incorporating data that's already out there, things that we already know. We went to every address in 2010. We're going to reuse that data. And we're also going to save money and improve accuracy by incorporating more data sets externally that are available to us. This is a big one for us. If we can get the American public to engage and respond to the census a little bit better, we can save a lot of money. So we also know it's a quality. There's quality implications that you know more about yourself than we do. That might be the first time you've ever heard somebody from the federal government say, you know more than we do. But people do a better job of counting themselves than we do. Our goal is to make this as easy as possible to respond. So we're using a lot of mobile and web data options, and we're also expanding the option for people to respond via telephone. What we want to do is also look at what's available to us out there. There's a lot of data out there that we could use, potentially. We know we can't do the census with it. We can't just go to some administrative database and count people. But what we can do is put it to good use on things like, we know units are vacant. I mean, there's a lot of data out there, utilities, whatever it is, that shows that there are units with people not living in them. We know that there's units that don't exist. Maybe we can use that data rather than sending a census taker out to go look at that address. We can just remove that directly. We also know that we don't have to go back and knock on a door 17 times to try to get somebody home. There might be data that helps us strategize in terms of when to go back to that household. And we also know that we waste a lot of money going back when people aren't home. So we want to reduce the number of visits. So our biggest cost savings is that 500,000 census takers that we hired. We can save a lot of money. So this is our greatest opportunity to harvest savings, and we're looking at 2 key areas of research. The first is to re-engineer the field work. How do we do our work? We just give a census taker a pile of questionnaires, a box of pencils, and say, go for it? Or can we help them do their work a little bit better? So just like your UPS driver delivers a package to your door, they don't just get a whole truckload of boxes and then they just have to figure out how to deliver them. They have an optimized route that they follow, and we're using some of that same strategy in terms of how we manage our information. We're also giving, we're incorporating things like automated training and the way our supervisors monitor the work to do some things. We're also changing some of the structural roles in terms of how we schedule staff and do some of the ratios, and that's going to save us a lot of money. So this is part of our test plan. It's kind of a fun little graph, but you can see that we started this actually in 2014, and we're progressing towards the 2020 census. The red stuff is kind of our practice, where we're practicing, and the blue stuff is where we're starting to operationalize and actually produce something. So we're right in this sort of phase where we're converting from red to blue. We're starting to do some blue things, but we're still doing a lot of practicing. And one of the places we're practicing is right here. This is our census test area in Los Angeles County. LA County was chosen as one of 2 test sites. One was in Houston and one was in LA. And it's kind of a fun test site if you look at that. Why did we choose LA? Well, the Census Bureau wanted to test how these new methods worked in an urban area. Is that an urban area? Pretty much. We wanted to incorporate the test of using, because we're using a lot of technology options, how do these things work when you're using non-Roman alphabet characters? It's interesting that when you're accepting write-in responses or you're doing text interchanges, most of that analysis is done with Roman alphabet stuff. We can do English and Spanish. We're pretty good at that. But starting to incorporate some of the characters that are in Chinese and Korean was something. So is this an area with Chinese and Korean population? Yep. Hard to count areas. We wanted to see how this works in places where people are less likely to answer the census. And we know that these are areas where people are less likely to answer the census. And areas with high vacancy rates, well, at one point there was, but now the vacancy rates have all kind of dried up. So we're getting more of our vacancy information from the Houston test site than we are from here. This is an analysis of the language for the test area. This is our schedule. So we've opened an office in Glendale to support this test. We did a mail-out, a residential mail-out to all of the addresses in this area in late March. Our target day is April 1st, Census Day. That's sort of the focal point where we want people to try to count themselves. And now we're in the phase of non-response follow-up. We expect to wrap that up here in just a few weeks. Then we'll close this office in July and we'll be done, and we'll kind of sit back and look at what we learned in the test. This is some of the information that we used in terms of how we contacted households. We sent a postcard and we asked people to just go to the website and answer, or we sent them a questionnaire and asked them to either fill it out on paper or send it on the internet. We tried a bunch of different things. Letters, we tried bilingual letters, all sorts of stuff. So this is what it looks like when you go online. So now instead of getting that paper questionnaire, you get this. If you go to the website, this is how we'll have you log in. And something that we're testing right now, is this business right here. You see this little barcode? That's the ID for that address. And in previous censuses, you had to have that ID in order to respond, because we need to know where on the ground you are in addition to how many people live there. So there's this little option that if you don't have that ID, just click there. And what we do is we've incorporated this strategy where you don't have to have your ID to respond. You can just enter your address, and we give you a screen that sort of looks like this. You put in your address, and then we geocode that address manually or automatically behind the scenes. What that does is it means that you don't have to have that census paperwork to answer your census. You can go online, you can answer this, and it's a lot more convenient. We expect that we're going to get a lot more public participation, and we can be mobile. We can take iPads out or tablets, or I don't know what. I have to be careful. I can't say it's all Apple because we use things besides Apple. But we can take mobile technology out and have people answer the census without having to do it at their residence. We're still going to use a unique ID for each address that we process. So we'll do that behind the scenes or in a back-end process or something like that. The other thing that we're doing is this incorporation of language. You see up here there's this option to toggle English. This is what it looks like in Spanish. This is what it looks like in Chinese. And this is what it looks like in Korean. So this is what we're testing on the test. So far, we're learning that people still, older people still like to send back a mail questionnaire. Younger people like the internet option. And we're getting mixed signals in terms of what's the best contact strategy to motivate response. So we're working through some of that stuff now, but we're still in the field. So we hired 600 temporary workers to do this. We had a very small outreach effort where we went out and tried to motivate people to respond, did a couple of small press conferences. We gave our enumerators iPhones. In Houston, they used Android devices. And our supervisors had tablets. We're still in the field. So any of you living in the test area, you still might get a knock on the door from one of us if you didn't answer already. Just not related to this test, but there's a couple of other initiatives that we're working on. We're determining, we've got a national content test going on in terms of what we're going to ask and how we're going to ask it. One of the big things that's out there is we're testing the race and Hispanic origin. How are we going to ask this question on race and Hispanic origin? And there's a lot of action and activity related to how we're going to deal with Hispanic. How are we going to incorporate Hispanic as a race or an ethnicity? And then we're also testing the introduction of what we call MENA, Middle Eastern and North African race category. So we're working through that activity right now. We're also looking at the relationship, including same-sex relationship categories. We're testing some of the dynamics related to the data there. And then we're expanding and sort of reinvestigating how we're going to work with our hard-to-count communities. What are we going to do to motivate people to answer the census? And, of course, building an infrastructure. So that's what we're doing. This is what we have left until Census Day. 1,388 days. That doesn't seem like a lot to me. Probably seems like a lot to you. But it seems like we just did this, and now we're getting ready to do it again. So kind of where we are. Thank you. I'll take questions from anybody who doesn't work for the Census Bureau. Yes, sir.
I was just curious, on the digital version that you're operating off of now in the test site, how much how error-proof is the entering of the address system? Does it insist on a suite number for multi-tenant spaces, or can it kind of weed some of that out for you, or is that all on the back end?
Yeah, so there are some checks in some of the address screens, but you don't have to put in a suite number. We're actually testing a couple of approaches. One is to have you geocode your address. So you put in your address, and then you have some options, and you say, you know, just like you do when you're entering your Amazon address or whatever, it says, is this the correct address? So you confirm it and geocode it. So there's some interactive geocoding that we're testing. We're also testing the back-end geocoding on the other side. So you can do as little as you want, but the chances of it being reliable are less. So we're not necessarily validating that address when we get it. We're testing both ways, validated up front or validated at the back. So we'll see which works better. Yes? It's proprietary. We're geocoding it to what we call our master address file, which is, I think the processes are open source, but the actual data set will be proprietary. Yeah. It's protected by confidentiality.
Hi, thank you for including some margin of error in your graph.
Yeah.
Are you also testing margin of errors as you are using your new methods and in your enumeration?
So it's, I mean, we're always testing for error. I mean, we're a statistical agency, so everything we do is incorporate some elements of error. I blew through this really fast. Our test plan is so broad in so many things. Are we actually measuring an undercount in this Los Angeles County test? The answer is no. That's not what this test is designed to produce. It's not designed to produce population. We do have a plan, an end-to-end test in 2018, where we will start to incorporate those elements of error measurement. But we are looking at some of these smaller population counts to see, is this getting us close to what we want or not? But to give you that kind of precise graph, you won't see that out of this test. You might out of the 18.
Pardon me for asking this. What about the count of homeless?
So we do a count of persons without housing, because homeless is sort of it can be a definition that has mixed meanings to a lot of people. We are not incorporating that in this test. In the objectives in this 16 test are not doing that, but as I said, we'll start doing that in 17, and in 18 we'll start testing our strategies for how we will count the homeless. Traditionally, we have counted them in several different ways. We count them at service locations, like we have partnerships with all the soup kitchens and the shelters and different places like that. But we also have a street count that we do, where we go out overnight and we go out to outdoor locations and we send teams of enumerators. In 2010, we took over the Dodger Stadium parking lot on the night of March 31st to stage the count for Los Angeles. I mean, it was this sort of massive population count where we sent teams out all over LA County and actually all over the United States and counted persons at street locations. But we do this over 3 days, generally centered around April 1st. We will start testing how technology will either help us or how we will incorporate that into our count starting next year. Okay, thank you very much.